Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Anna Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author, and yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello imaginative people, I'm Anna Tizard and this is episode 88 of Brainstoryum. Well, last time I talked a bit about the problem of trying to squeeze too many ideas into a short story, or how a short piece will flow better and be more satisfying to the reader if you streamline it. If you're working with some quite distinctive ideas, find a way to ensure they're interconnected and feed into one overarching theme or journey. I prefer the word journey in this context. It feels more practical and rooted in character and action at the same time. But it is, of course, possible to not put enough into a story to satisfy the reader, as I recently discovered while reading quite a prestigious, traditionally published anthology of short stories. In this otherwise very promising collection, I read a story about a woman who finds her house being broken into repeatedly by a mysterious intruder. Nothing is broken, nothing is taken, but they leave quite strange notes. It's eerie, and you just get to the point where the protagonist is figuring out this may in fact be some kind of spirit or imp, something not quite human, and she hears a sound coming from the attic upstairs. That's where the story ends. I mean, come on, this is not good practice, people. Did the author just chicken out? There might be an element of this. Maybe when she was writing it, she was thinking, I want to leave the reader with this lingering feeling of anticipation and mystery. Keep that as the last thing they feel. No. Just no. A mystery is meant to be solved. Do not use the excuse of a short writing space to leave your main thread dangling. It felt quite rude, because you invest time and imagination into reading when you read. It's not just a case of you've purchased something, you've spent money on it. We spend time and a bit of mental energy on reading when we pay for a book or a story. And it felt a bit like waiting ages for a bus that gets cancelled. Something more exciting than a bus. And of course, when I think back on the story, I cannot see the creature in my head because as readers, while it's true that we fill in gaps, we're not told every single tiny detail. I mean, that would be exhausting and off-putting to read in any case. But as readers, we are guided by what we are told, what we are given in the story. We only know what we are told or what is at least implied to us through the writing. We're not meant to, we shouldn't be expected to, just go away and dream up the rest of the story on our own. If this author only described, the creature's nose and shoes, it would have been something that I could imagine and fill the gaps around. But ultimately, more than anything, I just needed to experience the ending, the tie-off, to know what happens next. But instead, there is a creature in the attic who has made the ceiling creak, and I will never know what it looks like or what it does to the character in that story. I don't have an attic and I don't believe the creature actually exists, but this is how stories work. They get into our heads. They happen in the world of our imagination. I'm not naming names. It feels kind of mean, but if you're curious and you really want to know, just drop me a line and I'll tell you. Just me and you. Anyway, I'll stop bitching about unfinished stories turning up in published, presumably completed anthologies and move on to my listeners' ideas and stories based on a prompt from the last show. Now, the prompt I prompted you on last time was the ancient desert. Not quite as wacky a word combination as I usually suggest, because Exquisite Corpse, with its randomization of word entries, tends to create some unusual combinations. So I was curious as to whether this one might inspire less wildly imaginative ideas than I normally get coming in. How wrong I was. Alessandro and Nicholas Bozzo sent me a father-son collaboration and wrote, "The ancient desert. Some say it's older than time itself. A place where time stands still, the ancient desert has become a refuge for time travellers and portal jumpers from other dimensions. A safe haven where they can rest, restock, and refuel their contraptions before setting off on their next adventure." Oh yeah, this is some great world building. I can just see this in my mind's eye, setting the scene for who knows what characters arriving and leaving on different adventures. Thank you, Alessandro and Nico. Eric Montgomery wrote, "The ancient desert is an encrypted archive that has everything online since 1969. Deleted packets, expired blogs, broken links, and that questionable picture you sent someone, all preserved. No one agrees on how deep it goes. No one ever reaches the bottom." Ooh, this sent my head a-whirring. A fascinating idea. And to use the ancient desert as a title for something instead of taking it literally, like this digital no-go area. Thank you, Eric. Cranking up the amusement dial, Nick Vrakar wrote, "Tim wrapped up his story of the ancient pharaoh's treasure. And that's where the ancient idol was last seen, lost in the ancient desert." Kathy raised the idol in her hand. "You mean this one?" "Yes. Where did you get that?" "I guess someone found it between ancient and now." Great stuff. Thank you, Nick. You always make me laugh. Now, speaking of humour, it was lurking in the back of my mind all along, the possibility, would anyone take the really wacky road and reinterpret this as the ancient dessert, bunging in the extra S? Well, I was not disappointed. Dale Tudge, who is Dale Tudge Humour on Blue Sky, for good reason, as you're about to find out, wrote, "This year it was the roast goose. Last year, grandma. No one remembers what was meant to be there, only that now it's pudding. An ancient dessert, dense and moist, smelling of lost things and too much allspice. No one had made it. No one had spoken of it, and yet there it was, watching, steaming faintly, humming in a key just off from carol pitch, like a mosquito trying to sing Silent Night. Every year, a different family. Every year, one chair emptier by New Year's." Then he added, "The ancient dessert, a dense orb of ceremonial fruit, very old and quite aware. It waits until spirits are high before revealing itself. At the height of the feast, it manifests. No, it's not Nan's recipe. Hers was the one with the rum sauce. Thank you so much, Dale Tudge. That is wickedly funny and monstrously clever, with a touch of the surreal. I absolutely love it. Right, well, I think it's time to hunt down some new story ideas using the word game of Exquisite Corpse. But before we dive in, I'm sorry to say you might have to adjust your volume for this next part. The recording I made of the Exquisite Corpse game results, of me pulling out listeners' words, is, I think, a little quieter than usual, not such good sound quality, so apologies for that. In general, I have to be quite ninja in recording these shows because of my delightfully noisy neighbours. And on this occasion, I had to use a different room for this upcoming part, which I always record this part before any of the other sections of the show so that I've got my writing prompts ready. So you may need to increase the volume ever so slightly just for the next brainstorming part. But not before you have heard the ever loud, ever triumphant organ jingle that heralds the approach of the Socks of Destiny. Dun dun dun! That's right, and for those who haven't played before or listened before, Exquisite Corpse randomises different players' words and phrases into a single sentence that goes describing word noun, action, describing word noun. So it's our imagination's job to make sense of what may probably only make grammatical sense. So it's with some trepidation that I reach into the first sock, the describing word sock. This is from Mariah. Barking. Okay, something or someone who barks. Next word, if I reach really deep into the sock, is from Paul Thomas. Traitor. A barking traitor. Is that a barking laugh or an actual bark? Let's try for an action. Who's this from? Alessandro Bozzo. Won a duel for. Won a duel for? So they were fighting for something or someone. Just going to move straight on to the next word and see what we've got here. This is from Fraser Armitage. This is very crinkled, so it has been at the bottom of the sock for some time. Impromptu. So something spontaneous and made up on the spot. Final word, and then I will read out this bizarre new sentence. The next word is from Mariah again. Oh, tarantula. Ooh, what is an impromptu tarantula? So altogether we have the barking traitor won a duel for the impromptu tarantula. This is very strange. I'm gonna jot it down and have a think about it. Actually, I'm gonna pour my green tea already because I definitely need some inspiration for this. Let's just give that a stir. Impromptu is making me think about theatre. And then that in turn is making me think about a costume. Could this be a hideous costume for a tarantula? Impromptu can also, I suppose it makes me think about things that are surprising, things that jump out of you. Again, to me, that's one of the things that makes spiders really scary, is that they jump out at you, or you just suddenly become aware of them. A duel seems like a really old-fashioned way of settling an argument. It feels very posh. I see men in frilly shirts with posh accents, feeling very entitled. But fighting for a spider, or to win spider-like powers? Unless the impromptu tarantula is in fact a theatre itself, or a theatre group, a theatre of horrors. I'm not sure how this is coming together, if it's coming together at all, so I'm just going to reach for the next Exquisite Corpse and see what happens. Our first word is from Kimberly. Dreaming. Okay. Next word, our noun, is from Paul Benfield. Sea mist, a dreaming sea mist. This is rather interesting. Feels like a place, a dreamlike place, whether it's in a dream or somehow contains dreams. Action is from Fraser Armitage. Threatened. That feels more vague, more approximate, so it gives us a bit of wiggle room as to how a sea mist, a dreaming sea mist, threatens someone. Next word is from Sean, also known as Blue Wizard Facts. Kaleidoscopic. Lots of refracted colours. This also seems quite dreamlike. It's almost as if serendipity is coming into play with this Exquisite Corpse. Final word is from Paul Benfield. She says, final last words, detective. A kaleidoscopic detective? Good grief. So the entire Exquisite Corpse is the dreaming sea mist, threatened, the kaleidoscopic detective, a detective of kaleidoscopic things. It makes me think of those funny little telescope things you had when we were kids. Maybe this is just like a 1980s thing and I'm really showing my age, but where you have all these colours and you just sort of you swivel it and you can see different colours. But the dreaming sea mist threatened, a detective of kaleidoscopes. I really like this one, the dreamlike quality it has, not just from a dreaming sea mist, as fascinating as that is, but from a detective who is in some way kaleidoscopic, and the idea of detecting something, but it turns out to be dreams or connected with dreams in some way. Maybe dreams themselves are caught in a mist and this detective is beginning to feel threatened, as the Exquisite Corpse suggests, as this mist sort of closes around him or her. I imagine someone sitting in a pub after a long day and she's completely puzzled by a rather bizarre case. Maybe she's been asked to spy on someone, to find out what they're up to. But then when she leaves a little later to stroll home, a mist or a fog full of whispers closes around her, and it contains the dreams of, well, either the person she's been asked to keep an eye on or the one who has instructed her to do the spying. This is very weird. There's something there, but I'm just going to move on to the next Exquisite Corpse and see what number 3 is. Keep my options open. So the first word is from Fraser Armitage, sympathetic. Okay, let's try for our next word. This is from Paul Thomas, escutcheon. Okay, so I had to look this up. I had not come across this word before, and I have scribbled all around the edges of this tiny slip of paper. It is either a shield or emblem bearing a coat of arms, or it can be a flat piece of metal for protection or sometimes ornamentation around a keyhole or door handle or light switch. There's another meaning that's something to do with reputation. So a blot on your escutcheon is a blot on your reputation or something like that. But I think it's quite an old word, and I certainly haven't heard that use of it myself before. Well, I haven't heard of it at all, to be honest. So a sympathetic escutcheon, I'm drawn to the keyhole idea because I'm just wired like that. I like portals and things. So I'm just going to keep going and grab the next entry, which is from Mariah. Oh my goodness. Wrote a string quartet and entitled it. Oh, wow. Okay, so we have potentially a keyhole, a very musical keyhole that writes string quartets and entitles it. This is very weird. Next word is from Paul Benfield. Shadowy. Okay. I'm just going to find out what this string quartet piece is called. Final word is from Rachel. It is called The Shadowy Lamp. Oh, wow, this is interesting. So all in one we have the sympathetic escutcheon wrote a string quartet piece and entitled it The Shadowy Lamp. Ooh, that is an intriguing title for a piece of music. But then how can a keyhole, or the protective piece of metal around a keyhole, write a piece of music and then name it? Unless someone whistles through the keyhole and the sound is transformed into a tune. But even then, it's not really a case of the keyhole itself taking control of that process. I do like the idea of a sympathetic keyhole, though. This is something that could definitely turn an ordinary door into a portal, surely, to somewhere where there is a shadowy lamp. Oh, and it's only just occurred to me how strange it is that a lamp, a thing that's meant to give light, is described as shadowy. I love that idea. I'd be tempted by either side of this exquisite corpse, quite frankly, to come up with a story based around a shadowy lamp or a sympathetic escutcheon, a keyhole, writing or somehow making music happen. In fact, I think shadowy lamp might be the prompt that I suggest to you for your ideas, so get your pens ready. Well, I have some interesting suggestions today. Thank you everyone for your words, which have brought up some very bizarre combinations. I think I'm going to just drink some more green tea and see what happens using the pause button a lot. So just to warn you before I get started, this story has turned out to be quite dark. The locksmith and the shadow stitcher came together for one reason only: the shadow harvest. The locksmith's smile was brittle, with a glint of things unsaid. He was a man who dealt in keeping things, storing secrets away from the light. A man with large, clever hands, a sympathetic smile, and a coat so dark it might have been cut from the night sky. All this the shadow stitcher saw and nodded. She was a woman wrapped in so many layers of shawls, it was hard to get a precise sense of her shape. Only her wizened face showed, and her long, knobbly hands, one already dipping into the basket she held in the crook of her arm. And so here we are again. They stood at the edge of the forest like they always did. It was autumn, of course it was autumn, when the shadows were rich and sharp, ripe for the picking. The low golden shafts of sunlight were entwined with shadows with a longer reach than in any other season. In winter, shadows gathered in layered, clumsy pools, too soft-edged to be malleable. The early strains of spring light were too feeble. It took a long summer to deepen the lights, and for the sun to shift low enough in the sky to refract between the stripes of trees, just as their curled leaves tightened. Yes, October was the shadow harvest, and the stitcher was ready to stitch. But this time she hesitated and threw a quizzical look at the locksmith. What you need is a permanent solution, so you don't have to keep coming back to me each year. Am I right? A permanent supply of shadows? How can this be? It was true, he did rely on her, though no one would have known. His ordinary business of key-cutting was just a front. People sold him secrets, the things they longed to forget. He had a warehouse at the end of his garden that mysteriously repelled any snoopers that went near it. Inside it, he inverted spaces, created steel boxes that could be flipped inside out. Boxes with false backs and sides, apparently empty. But the capture of a customer's secret took more than his skills. The right kind of shadow was needed to slip around the neck of a memory and gently guide it out. Guilt, regrets, sorrows heavy and bitter as oversteeped coffee. He would wrap them all up and bury them in a locker that had no key. Customers left with a skip in their step, their hearts and pockets lighter. The woman knew all this, for she understood the shape of shadows. In the cup of her bony palm, she could twist and pinch the darkness to her design. All she asked for in return was a week of the man's life. Memories, secrets, all, but only that which would live inside a week. I will create a lattice for you, she explained, hooking her angular fingers around the idea. A net with which you may snare shadows for yourself. Or even better, fold it into quarters and place it over any ordinary lamp. Slip it over the shade and the lamp's light will call to all the shadows in the room and beyond. And they will come to you. The locksmith frowned. How would that work? I need customers to visit me, to make payment. She narrowed her eyes wisely. That they will do, with a little more compulsion and urgency than usual. Dragged by the desire to tell and release. For darkness calls to darkness, and in the shadows it doth breed. A flicker of uncertainty at this oldie-worldy language quickly faded from the locksmith's expression as he contemplated the ease and speed with which his customers might come hammering on his door, pockets full of cash. How much for this lattice? He asked. The catch of urgency in his voice made the woman glance away, smuggling down a smirk. The same as usual. No offence, but... The woman shrugged, with an apologetic downturn of her mouth. I'm trying to wean myself off this borrowed time thing. I'm getting old. I do not relish the flavours of human life as much as I used to. I'm spending more time with the forest these days. She lifted her gaze to the canopy, dry leaves rattling against the trees' skeletons. My power begins to wane. I feel it is time for me to retire from the dark arts. She huffed a little sigh, like a full stop after her last word. Perhaps it was enough to convince him. Not waiting for an answer, she stepped forward with a carefully placed crunch on the forest floor. She waited for the woodland creatures, those invisible whiskered things, noses trembling as they sniffed the air she breathed, trying to assess what kind of creature she was, and failing, before they scattered under fallen leaves and crumbling bark. Spreading her long-nailed fingers, she swept her hand over the ground under a dark shadow puddle of a fat oak, a chuckle gathering in her throat. The locksmith watched on in silence, keeping still, his hands behind his back. She rolled and massaged the darkness in her palms, then pinched either end between finger and thumb and drew the thread out and out. Out until her arms were as wide apart as they could be. Still smiling her secret smile that told the locksmith he would never guess what she was capable of, she broke the thread in the middle, placed the two strings side by side, and began stretching them again. Back in the security of his warehouse, the locksmith surveyed the rows of containers pressed against the wall, one ready and open for his next customer's secrets. An odd stab of guilt made him almost double up. He tutted, whispered under his breath, "You've helped these people. You've helped them live easier lives." But though they were nothing but memories, wrapped and tied in shadows, there was a weight to this room, to the things that were held in it, that had nothing to do with the steel and aluminium barriers that kept them inside. He took out the shadow lattice from his pocket. Such a delicate thing. Strands so thin they might have been hairs. As he carried it between careful fingers over to his desk lamp where he carried out these transactions, two chairs placed at a friendly but businesslike angle to each other, a laptop folded and waiting on the small desk, another shock made him stumble. He slipped the shadow lattice over the lampshade before he could drop the precious thing and clasped his painful stomach. What was this? An image had flashed in his mind of a woman's hair held tightly in his fist. But that was a very long time ago. Damn these shadows. This lattice thing must be more sensitive than he realised. And so cheap. She practically gave it to him for free. He let out a laugh, swallowing his doubt. How ridiculous to get paranoid like that. Of course the lattice would have an almost magnetic effect on any dark memory, the sort of memory it was designed to pull from his customers. Smirking to himself, he turned to open the door, then flicked on the lamp and sat down. All he had to do was wait, and the customers would come. Minutes passed. The door creaked on its hinges at a breeze, making the locksmith's eyes flutter open. Surprised that he'd fallen into a doze, he shifted in his chair, and that's when he saw them. Shadows streaked across the opposite wall, sidling together, then apart, as if conspiring to make shapes, a silent theatre for an audience of one. Silhouettes of two figures locked in a dance. A choking embrace, a head tipped backwards, hand outstretched to grasp at nothing. The locksmith stood slowly, as if the pressure of the air in the room were weighing him down. Shadows danced and twisted. Shadows of murders not quite committed. A hand raised with a knife ready to plunge. A fist gripping a woman's hair as she wrestled to get away, mouth open. All the secrets he'd stowed away, the worst of them, shivering free, splashed against his wall. Some of them his. The darkness dripped along the tiled floor to where he stood and puddled around his feet. The lamp seemed to swing behind him and a little to the side, but that might have been a trick of the light or his mind as the room tipped forward then. With a gasp, he felt the tug at his heels. Toppling forward onto his knees, he grappled the smooth tiles for a fingerhold that wasn't there. Then, a soft tremor in his ear, a cluck of disapproval. The voice of the Shadow Stitcher, or whatever she was. What was this magic? Had she wound a piece of herself into the lattice, left a trace of her thoughts inside it? As the locksmith writhed on the floor, resisting the drag of the shadow lattice, her voice traced itself along his spine like one of those long, cold fingernails. It was one of those memories you let slip in the last week you gave me of your life. Your revolting, snatching little life. Do you think I would want another week of that? Last autumn I sickened of you. Shadows should be soft, malleable things, not these charred streaks leaving bloody trails behind them. Half paralysed, I lay for a week in the forest, asking for her guidance. It came. The earth spoke and told me what to do. And so all your shadows will be gathered and stored in a box of your own making. And with that, the fingers of Shadow lengthened as long as the thin branches that reached to the autumn sky and grappled him into the open container. The box snapped shut. It was the last anyone saw of the locksmith. That was quite dark, wasn't it? I did not see that coming. And so it was that the sympathetic escutcheon... No, I can't claim that. I did not manage to write a story based on the entire Exquisite Corpse this time. It was just based on the shadowy lamp. But, having said that, there is no way it would have taken the direction it had unless I had also been thinking about escutcheons or keyholes. The concept of locking things away is fundamental to this story, so even though I couldn't quite resolve, the sympathetic escutcheon wrote a string quartet and entitled it The Shadowy Lamp, I would never have written the story in this particular way without having contemplated this unique, bizarre sentence exactly as it was. In fact, even though there was no string quartet, I was thinking about strings and shadows being strung out, made thin and threading through something or being sewn. It wasn't just a keyhole or locksmith connection that I drew from the rest of the Exquisite Corpse. Now, I feel kind of spoilt for choice here when it comes to inviting your ideas on a short story prompt. What about the Dreaming Sea Mist? I love that one. Or maybe I'd really like to know what you would make of the Shadowy Lamp. I think I'll leave the decision up to you. You know what to do. Go to annatizard.com and click the contact button on any page footer. Let me know your idea or paragraph or poem by the Friday after this show comes out to be sure I have enough time to include it in my recording at the weekend. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstorium. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.